I have chosen to do Australian tennis player Margaret Court. With 64 major Grand Slam titles to her name, Margaret Court stands alone as one of the greatest tennis players of all time. The book I have read is Margaret Court, the Autobiography, written by Margaret Court herself and published by MacMillian, 25th of October 2016. Being a big tennis fan, I was eager to learn more about Margaret Court. I have sat in Margaret Court Arena at the Australian Open Grand Slam in Melbourne, always reading about her records and achievements in the tennis booklet. Margaret's courage and sheer determination has inspired women all around the world. After reading the autobiography, I was able to learn more about Margaret Court, her rise into the tennis world, and how she became one of the greatest champions of all time. Firstly, I will talk about the sport delivery systems that enabled Margaret Court to stand where she does today. So, sport delivery systems. What are they and why are they so important? According to the book Sport Management in Australia, sport delivery systems involve a range of organisations and agencies that work together for sport for all. Sport delivery systems are put into place to assist in increasing participation in that said sport. These sport delivery systems are important as these agencies provide competition and services to all participants to allow equal opportunity to progress into the sport desired. In this Vodcast, I will be analysing the delivery systems that enabled Margaret Court to progress from her local tennis club in Albury to being an international tennis champion. The major competitions Margaret competed in, competition format of tennis, Margaret's achievements, and the organisations and individuals that helped her reach these tennis dreams. Margaret was born in Albury, New South Wales, on 16th of July 1942, to a working-class family. Margaret states throughout her autobiography that her family didn't have much, and she had a very poor upbringing. Margaret discovered tennis all on her own at the age of 8. She would sneak into the local grass tennis courts across from her house, finding an old timber paling as a racket and an old ball. Margaret would trespass time and time again to play on the lower hidden grass courts. The owner caught her and asked if she wanted to come to coaching clinics at the club. Her family barely afforded the 2 shillings for her to go, but somehow made it work. Margaret attended these coaching clinics, which set the fire in her heart to be the tennis star that she is today. Margaret had a determination for success, and this was demonstrated through all of her tennis achievements. When Margaret was 13 years old, her then coach, Frank Sedgman, told her that she was so talented she could be the first Australian woman to win Wimbledon. 8 years later, Margaret Court achieved that dream and spent the next decade creating tennis history. Margaret started playing socially at her local club in Albury, with her natural talent shining through. Her coach at the time realised she was too good against kids her age and moved her up a division. In Margaret's teen years, she won schoolgirl championships in the Albury region, as well as taking out several pennant tournaments. Margaret, still practising at her local tennis club, started progressing into state tennis events that were available in Victoria and New South Wales. In some of these tournaments, she won junior and senior titles in doubles and mixed. Margaret wanted to take her tennis career further, but didn't know the avenues to go down. Her local coach from Albury, Wal Rudder, sent her to compete in Victoria Schoolgirl Championships against girls 2 years older than her, where scouts were there to watch. When Margaret won 19 and under Schoolgirls Championship, the verdict was she had a natural talent. Frank Sedgman offered to take Margaret on in Melbourne. At the age of 15, Margaret moved to Melbourne. The move to Melbourne was also an opportunity for Margaret to gain sponsorship by a tennis company that would allow Margaret to work for them while playing. Margaret didn't get sponsored until she became a household name. Margaret's transition into playing on a national level started slow. Her first few games she lost convincingly. Margaret never gave up. Her trainer at the time was reluctant to train her as he'd never trained a girl before. Margaret was the first of her time to lift weights and do extreme training. Margaret started a winning streak and continued this form to beat the Australian #1 and become the Australian champion. Although Margaret naturally thought her next progression would be on an international stage, she was disappointed to find out that the Lawn Tennis Association of Australia, now known as Tennis Australia, left her out of its best female tennis players to compete and represent Australia at the French, Wimbledon, US Champs and other European and American tournaments. The association stated Margaret was too physically and mentally immature to cope with challenges of international tour. Margaret continued to work hard that year, winning the Queensland and South Australia championships. She found herself on the international team the following year. Knockout is the most commonly used format in tennis. Players are put into a draw, the winners progress to the next round, and the losers drop out. Top players and pairs are seeded on the basis on their rankings they are entering the tournament with. Margaret Court has a long list of achievements that are mentioned on this slide and the next. I'll name a few now. In 1960, at the age of 17 and then the youngest player, male or female, to win an Australian Championship singles title. In 1963, became the first female Australian tennis player to win Wimbledon. She was the first female tennis player and the second female tennis player to win a calendar year Grand Slam, claiming the Australian, French, Wimbledon and US titles. She is the only player in history to have won a Grand Slam in both singles and mixed doubles. She holds the record for the most Grand Slam singles of any player, 24, holds the record for the most Grand Slam titles, including singles, doubles and mixed doubles, of any player, 64, and holds the record for the most single titles of any player in history, 192. I believe Margaret Court had a good understanding of sport delivery systems. There is a mention throughout the autobiography of organisations and mainly individuals who helped Margaret in her tennis career, and she states in her autobiography if it wasn't for them, she wouldn't have been the tennis star she was today. However, the sport delivery systems have changed and evolutionized since Margaret played tennis. She states throughout her book she wished she had more backing from Lawn Tennis Association in her early competing days on the circuit. Margaret's sport delivery systems was based on individuals taking a gamble on her and helping her with coaching in her early career, training, and funds, as when Margaret started playing on the international circuit, she received little money for competitions, a huge comparison to tennis stars today earning millions. By conducting this analysis, I have learnt there were so many individuals in Margaret's career, all with the purpose of wanting Margaret to excel. By studying the autobiography of Margaret Court, I was able to understand how the sport delivery systems enabled her to achieve greatness.